You're listening to a Times Higher Education podcast.
Hello, welcome to this week's campus podcast with me, Miranda Prynne.
And with me, Eliza Compton.
So, we have something a bit different for this week's podcast. Every year, we like to mark the annual THE Awards on campus by inviting all the shortlisted candidates to share advice on some element of their work in higher education. And you can find all this amazing professional insight in our latest Spotlight Guide. But it's also something of a tradition that we catch up with some winners from the previous year to find out how their award-winning work has progressed and what lessons it could offer to others. So, Eliza, tell us who you spoke to.
Yeah, so I chatted to Mark Brown, who is a Professor of Evolutionary Ecology and Conservation at Royal Holloway, University of London, and a world-leading scientist in understanding the impact of agrochemicals and pathogens on bumblebees, which I think is fascinating. He was named the Outstanding Research Supervisor of the Year at last year's THE Awards, and I have to say they must really be doing something special over at Royal Holloway, because this year's winner in that category, Felix Driver, is also from that institution. And Mark was terrific. He shared some great advice about doctoral supervision and for preparing students for making their own impact on the world with their research.
Wonderful. Well, I feel anyone whose work is dedicated to saving the bees is worth listening to. To add to that, you will also hear from the vice-chancellor of THE's 2023 University of the Year, Roderick Watkins of Anglia Ruskin University. And he spoke about what sets ARU apart from other institutions and how it has really focused on building capacity in very specific areas of need. I also spoke to two academics from the University of Central Lancashire, Joanne Pledger and Ruth Spencer, who lead the team behind a wonderfully imaginative widening participation initiative which uses dance to teach school children astronomy. So more from them later. Let's start by hearing from Mark.
Hi Mark, and welcome to the Campus Podcast.
Eliza, thanks very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
I'm looking forward to having a chat about research supervision. You, of course, were the winner of the Outstanding Research Supervisor Award at the THE Awards last year for 2023. I wanted to start by asking you about how you balance PhD supervision with your own research and academic work.
So that's a great question. As a scientist, and I guess as a scientist whose work is empirical, meaning that we do a lot of experiments in the lab and in the field, most of my research is collaborative with my PhD students and with postdoctoral researchers in my group. And so that's not so much a case of balancing my supervision with my research, because my supervision is part of my research. Obviously, I do have some research projects which PhD students may not be involved with. And there, it's really about managing timelines and managing time to make sure that I'm giving the correct time at the correct point in time to my students when they need it, and to be able to help them get to their goals. And I think for me, it's very key that I prioritize them over myself. And from a research perspective, to me, that's fairly obvious. I'm an established researcher. They are starting their research journeys, and it's more important that they are individually successful than that I am. And that's sort of my guiding viewpoint. In terms of balancing research, including both collaborative research within the group and also my independent research with other academic work, that's much more of a challenge. Academic work includes teaching and administration, both of which generally come with very hard deadlines. And so the key there is enabling yourself to prioritize research in the same way that you have to prioritize teaching and administration. And again, that's really about good. It's ultimately about good time management, but also not allowing the immediate to overwhelm the important.
Interesting. It really sounds like a very diverse skill set that you need to do PhD supervision well.
And generally not something you're trained in. So you generally learn, I think, by being supervised, by watching other supervisors, by, if you're lucky, having fantastic mentors. And then obviously there is CPD, so you can take individual courses for specific aspects, and I think it's really important to stay on top of that. And I've certainly benefited from CPD over the last few years in terms of my understanding of neurodiversity and how I can support people with neurodiverse aspects.
Interesting. Yeah, absolutely. That widening participation element is something that we're going to get into in this conversation. I wanted to ask you too about what misconceptions you had about PhD supervision before you became a supervisor yourself.
So that's a great question. I think when I was a PhD student, the misconception that I had was that all of the accommodation was being done on my part. So I was trying to fit myself away around the way my PhD supervisor communicated and worked. And it was a misconception because that's not what was happening. That's just what felt it was happening to me. And I think one thing that you realize very quickly when you start supervising your own students is that actually this is a two-way conversation, and that means you have to adapt the way you work, the way you listen to people, the way you help and support people to every individual student. There is no one size fits all. Everyone is unique, but also every interaction is unique. Different students will bring out different aspects of your own way of thinking or working or personality. And really, it's about getting that dynamic to the best place where the student is benefiting as much as possible and you're able to give the best of yourself as a supervisor. And so, yeah, that misconception that it was a one-way street was very rapidly overturned when I started. And I guess in terms of moments, it was probably when I did have my first PhD students and I started with three at the same time, which was a challenge. I didn't realize it was a challenge when I when I took it on. And they were very diverse people in terms of their backgrounds and experiences and desires and communication modes. And that made me rapidly realize actually I had to do a lot of that accommodation work, which is as it should be, but I didn't really realize until that point.
Interesting. And I think you supervised more than 50 students, masters and PhD, over your 20 years of supervision, and that more than half have been first in family. So, and you've mentioned neurodiversity, and I wanted to ask you about the support and encouragement of students that they might need perhaps when the doctoral path is very unfamiliar, or that perhaps they're losing confidence in their own ability to get through to the end.
Yeah, and that I think is a real challenge. Again, obviously it's very individualized, but for me, I think the baseline from which I start is that I'm honest and open about my own journey. And that journey, like the journey of most people, academia, has had moments of failure in it, has had bits where I just thought I this was wrong for me. I couldn't do this anymore. And I'm always very open about showing that, but also sharing current struggles that I have. And I think that opens the door for people to realize that actually it's okay for them to find it difficult or to struggle. And it opens the door for them also to ask for help and to ask for support. So I think having that very honest and open communication about yourself with students it's hard because you're exposing yourself, but actually they benefit from it much more than it's challenging for you to do. And I've done that in a number of ways. So I do it very individually with students, but also in research centers that I've run or in structures that I've run. We've had sessions where the PIs, the supervisors, have got up and talked about their journey and talked about where things didn't go to plan or where things didn't go the way they wanted it to or where it didn't work. And that again takes away this myth that the people who you're seeing above you have had this smooth path of success, which I think inevitably human beings create for people who have gone through something before them. And we always individuate the challenges as being particular to us, and of course they're not. But I'm also, in addition to that, I'm very aware of the challenges that my students face. We meet obviously regularly, both formally and informally. And I try to culture that informal relationship so people do feel comfortable talking directly to me, or if they don't, that they feel comfortable talking to someone else in the group, knowing that that person in the group will then come to me and say, Mark, this person needs some help and this is the direction they need it in.
Mm.
And I guess in terms of how you structure that help so it's best for the person who's receiving it, again, a lot of that is about asking and listening. So never assuming that I know what is the best route, but actually allowing that person the space to say, well, actually, the way we're doing this isn't working for me, or I'm finding this really challenging. And that then I can respond to that, and then I can make suggestions and we can talk that through. But never trying to assume that just because I did something in the past in a similar situation, that it's going to be the solution this time.
That's really interesting and excellent advice. You are a Professor of Evolutionary Ecology and Conservation in the Department of Biological Sciences at Royal Holloway, University of London. And a lot of your work on bee health has had policy impact in the UK and further afield. And this is part of the academic journey and part of the remit of universities to knowledge share. But how do you prepare your students to have policy impact and to get involved with those broader kinds of conversations?
That's, yeah, another really good question. So I guess one direction that we do that in is we are always very cognizant about outreach opportunities. And so be that the science festival that we run on an annual basis at Royal Holloway, or the opportunity to talk to schools or to community groups, I always make those opportunities available to people in the group. So we discuss what the invitation is or what the event is. And then it's very open if people want to take part, and I encourage them to do so, but never make, obviously. That gives them sort of the first steps into that kind of outreach. And honestly, my experience is that PhD students are really excited about doing outreach and about the idea that the work they're doing could have a real world implication, even, be that from a child understanding something new to having an impact on European level policy. And so that's sort of the entryway. But I also talk about the direct policy work I do in a casual way all the time. And when there are opportunities for the work of a PhD student to feed into that, then that PhD student is part of that conversation. So they will take part in those meetings. And even if they only feel comfortable to sit and listen, they're learning and understanding how those interactions take place. So it's really about involving people at every level and helping them build their network as well, so that they know where they can go. And one of the things that's been really fun to support is when my students have applied for knowledge exchange fellowships. So recently, one of my students, Hannah Walmouth-Gordon, was a post fellow with the UK Parliament. And that was just an amazing opportunity for her. And it was wonderful to be able to support her in doing that, and then hear about it all when she came back. And I think that was a game changer for her in her PhD journey, in terms of understanding how science can influence policy.
Is that one of the more rewarding parts of the job?
I think honestly, my biggest reason for saying yes to supervision and to say to someone else, this is where I think you'll get the most out of it, is actually helping someone learn a whole bunch of new things, develop a whole set of skills, and see them change from the person they were when they arrived to someone who's more confident, has a broader skill set, and understands how they can apply that. That journey is just being able to help people to really develop those skills and realize they can apply them in a whole array of ways. To me, is really, really exciting. One of my students handed in her PhD yesterday, and it's just such a buzz, because I know that I've helped her to get to somewhere she wanted to be, and now she can take that. She's got a platform to go forward with, and for me, that's the real buzz. It's about helping people achieve something that they really want to achieve, and getting to them to the point where they can then use that for their future lives.
Thank you very much for being so open and generous with sharing these insights and advice on research supervision. Thanks very much, Mark. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you.
I really came away from this interview appreciating the skills that are needed to create the right environment for doctoral candidates to succeed. It's not just the ability to support research, although that's obviously key, but also the ability to offer opportunities for your students, your supervisees, to share their expertise, and also to provide an atmosphere where it's okay for them to express doubt, because everybody feels it, even the most successful and the people that we're looking to for inspiration.
Yeah, it's always worth remembering that, isn't it? We live in a world where we always see the successful outcome and less of the journey getting there. I think another thing that really strikes me from what Mark says is that so much of what he describes really points to the fact that he is always learning, and that his role involves constant adaptability, which is a theme that I feel really emerges across the whole academic spectrum, and leads me nicely into our next interview with Ruth and Joanne, talking about the Into Our Skies initiative and how they were able to successfully work in this transdisciplinary team, taking ideas from two very, very different disciplines, namely astronomy and dance, to create this wonderful project. Hi there, great to talk to you both. So, Ruth and Joanne, you are the brains behind a fantastic collaboration, which 1 year ago was recognised with a THE award. The Into Our Skies Space in Schools project teaches the concepts of Earth and space to primary school pupils through dance. Now, for the benefit of our listeners, could you each briefly introduce yourselves and explain your roles on this project?
Yes, so I'm Dr. Joanne Pledger. I'm an astrophysicist here at the University of Central Lancashire in Preston in the UK. My role on the project was kind of the scientist, to make sure that the science we were representing was correct, and working with Ruth and Lucy, who's our dance artist, to make sure that the dance was appropriate for the science we were representing.
And I'm Ruth Spencer, so I'm a senior lecturer in dance at UCLan, and worked with Joanne developing the project. Organically, really, it came about through partnership with Lucy Starkey, who was a dance artist that we'd been working with. Yeah, and it kind of developed over time, bringing that alternative way of engaging in learning.
I've given a very, very brief explanation of what the project entails there, but can you pad that out with a little more detail of exactly how it works?
Yes, so the project is essentially a 6-week scheme of work for teachers to use in the classroom or through home learning. It was a project developed in COVID, and it uses a combination of interactive dance videos combined with hands-on classroom activities that can be done with very simplistic equipment, so no kind of fancy kit is needed. And both of those things are used together holistically to teach the science and reinforce the science concepts, and to explore the science concepts, to kind of challenge the pupils' curiosity and creativity at the same time.
Fantastic. It is an unlikely pairing for most people to imagine. So how did this project initially come to fruition? How was the original idea sparked?
So Ruth and I came together through a colleague a number of years ago. I think it was back in 2016, to work together on a project for a museum up in Whitehaven. And the science and dance really worked together. It was a one-off kind of event, but it really did work together. But unfortunately, due to other commitments, we didn't do much together after that for a few years.
Yeah, and then Lucy Starkey started working with the dance team at UCLan. So we work very much with an approach of trying to embed our practice within the local dance ecology and support that dance ecology in the region. So Lucy had been coming in and working with our students. Lucy was then developing a new piece of work and in residence at the university. And she was creating a space-themed performance for families. And I suggested that she goes and talks to Joanne and checks out the science bit really and uses that as a kind of creative input.
Yeah, so Lucy's piece was called Into Our Skies. So I kind of worked with her and had a number of conversations with her about the science that she was representing and elements she might want to highlight or focus on or correct in some ways. And so we really enjoyed that process. It was nice for me to do something different as a kind of science offshoot. And so Lucy and I actually planned some in-person live engaging science through dance sessions at UCLAN's Alston Observatory, which is just outside of Preston. These were planned for Easter 2020, but obviously COVID hit and we had to cancel it. But the idea stuck. The idea of science through dance got us excited. So we kind of went back to the drawing board and thought, what can we do? And at the same time, I was speaking to another colleague, Cherry Canavan, who was working on a piece of educational research here at UCLAN that was saying that because of COVID, because of lockdown, teachers, primary school teachers specifically, were not sending home any science home learning during COVID. They didn't know what to send home. So this was kind of that light bulb moment that we needed, because dance teaching science was something that they could do at home. And that was kind of how the project was born.
In terms of actually how you teach this particular, I mean, the science that we're talking about here is obviously astronomy. Am I right in thinking it's the concepts of sort of how the Earth moves in space? How exactly do you teach that? What is the approach?
So the science concepts that it covers are those on the national curriculum for the English national curriculum. So it's things like the phases of the moon, the fact that the Earth orbits around the sun, the moon orbits around the Earth, shadows, the fact that the Earth and the sun are spheres, and kind of a 3D concept are all explored within the dance videos.
Yes, and so within the dance, it ranges from directed exercises for them to do, as well as creative exploration of ideas. So ideas like imagining that they're painting the inside of a sphere. So really experiencing for themselves that front space, that side space, as well as a back space, as well as above and below. So physically in kind of finding that 3D orientation for themselves. Or like Joanne was saying, in terms of looking at day and night, them physically exploring that kind of arcing apparent pathway of the sun in the sky from sunrise, finding the peak, so them being at full stretch and then arcing down towards the floor, and then contrasting that with creating shadow shapes that are long stretched out shadow shapes coming into smaller as we reach kind of the midday sun. And in the video, the children develop those dancers, so they then perform as a duet, with one child taking the sun pathway and the other dancer creating the appropriate shadow duet with that. So they find that interlocking of those two pieces of information.
And then there's also the hands-on activity within the classroom, which kind of reinforces that. So for example, with the shadow and the sun pathway, they can use a figure, whether it's a Lego figure or something similar to that, and they can use a torch or a light source to move it around their object and investigate how the shadow changes. So they're reinforcing what they're learning in the dance, and they're exploring it in two different ways.
Yeah, and the moment it's explained, it seems actually like a very natural meeting of two very different disciplines, because of course these things are very physical, very dynamic. It's a really clever way to engage children in it. I have read research that suggests that movement aids learning. What impact have you seen from this programme?
So the evaluation of our project from COVID onwards really revealed that teaching science through dance is a great way to get your children to learn. It increased the curiosity of the pupils, the focus that they had, and the participation of the pupils as well. And the critical thing from my point of view was that the science learning wasn't lost. The teachers that we evaluated stated that the science learning was the same, if not more, than what they would have done in kind of a normal classroom lesson. And I think the key thing that came out of the research that we've done is that we found particularly the participation of the pupils who wouldn't normally engage in science, the ones that would think science isn't for me, I'm not clever enough, I don't like science lessons because I find them difficult for some reason. What our research really showed was it was those pupils that benefited more from this approach. All pupils did, but those pupils in particular had a greater impact on them, and it made science accessible to them where maybe it wasn't before. So it was a fantastic thing to be finding out, and it was something that we'd aimed for, and we were glad that we achieved.
That makes sense. I mean, it sounds like great fun, if nothing else. Why do you think, beyond just that, this approach has been so effective?
Well, I think it does a lot of breaking down lots of stereotypes, as Joanne was referring to. And I think this notion that intellect is in the brain and that's the source of all intellect, it kind of is trying to smash some of that down a little bit and go that actually the body has an intelligence that it can bring to this, and that information can be absorbed and experienced. And at the same time, I think it's the creative thinking that comes out of it, that encouraging young people to think outside the box. So the very first project that Joanne and I did together up in the Northwest was where we discovered that the quality of questioning that came out about the science ideas after moving seemed to be more open, more explorative, and raising really key questions for children, a freedom to ask the questions, I suppose.
So I think that curiosity as well, and that idea of intelligence being a variety of intelligence, led us to kind of continue on the project. So we now have Space in Schools careering into our space, which is the extension of this project, funded by the UK Space Agency Space for All grant that we were awarded earlier this year. And so this is a CPD program for teachers. So it's for teachers to learn how to use the scheme of work in the best way possible, and to use it and how to adapt it for their pupils and for their needs. But also it's adding in a careers focus. It's adding in people who are STEM ambassadors working in the space industry to see what they look like. There's a lot more to being a scientist or an astronomer than just being an astronaut. And this kind of breaks down those barriers of science being for everybody. It really is. And there's a variety of jobs you can do within the space industry, which is one of the largest growing and fastest growing industries in the UK right now. And that there's actually a huge variety of jobs within that industry that's not just being an engineer or an astronaut. And so that's what we're trying to focus on now, is kind of pushing the impact even further. Yeah,
of course. From what you both said there, I like that this is all about breaking down barriers in more ways than one. So obviously, yes, the careers focus, but Ruth, what you said earlier as well about how by offering children or whoever really the opportunity to engage in more embodied forms of learning and other forms of learning, that it enables them to perhaps be more creative, to think outside the box. It breaks down their own internal barriers, which is, it's a very interesting point. Obviously, these things don't necessarily come easily. So what were the key challenges in putting this together, and how did you overcome those?
I think the first one was that we were trying to put it together during COVID. So there was a lot of Zoom calls and a lot of emails back and forth between myself, Ruth, and Lucy, trying to get the science right, the dance right, etc.
Yeah, I think we made a pilot in the corner of Lucy's living room, with a curtain kind of tacked onto the wall, so it was that kind of building our skills as we went along, really, because this wasn't the plan to do. I guess one of the other key challenges or things that we've recognized as we've gone through the project is that although we bring two disciplines together, there's also education as the third element in this project, and really, really important. And although both of us have strong public engagement backgrounds, the importance of the resource being relevant and usable for teachers, and creating a resource that wasn't just downloaded and put on the shelf in a staff room, that was readily and over a long period of time available to teachers, was really, really important for us.
Yeah, and that's where we brought on board people we knew who were teachers, primary school teachers who we'd worked with before in various different settings. And we brought them on board and we said, is this okay? What's it missing? What does it need? And so what that left us with was a resource that was really fit for purpose. And I think coming out of COVID, where a lot of schools were playing catch up and trying to kind of fill in those gaps in the knowledge that had been left by homeschooling, it was really important that the scheme of work was exactly what the teacher needed.
Yeah, absolutely. I've heard from a number of people working in universities doing outreach work in schools just how important it is that the work is aligned to the curriculum, because they're so squeezed for time. We've got to finish up, sadly, so I just wanted to ask, what would be, from each of you, a quick takeaway tip for anyone else wishing to bring two very different disciplines, or more than two, together?
Give yourself lots and lots of time. It's a big process, and as Ruth said, we realised relatively quickly we weren't bringing together two disciplines but three, and there's a lot of learning on both sides that needs to take place to understand and appreciate the other speciality, to understand the needs of the audience. I think is crucial, and you need time to do that.
And I think, once you take the time to understand each other's disciplines and appreciate what each other bring, then everything starts to kind of build and come together. And I guess what we keep having to sustain through that is a flexibility to shift and change the resource that we have and how it can be utilised within the ever-changing landscape and needs of schools and the profession, I think.
Well, look, thank you both so much for talking to me today. It's been really interesting hearing how such a creative project came to be.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
It's a brilliant project, and great to hear the team has secured funding to extend it out into teacher training in order to reach many more children. Now, our final interview for this week is a fascinating insight into a university with a laser focus on widening access to higher education by serving its region and providing a lot of careers-focused programmes, particularly for the public sector. So, let's hear from Roderick Watkins, a Professor of Composition and Contemporary Music, but also Vice-Chancellor of Anglia Ruskin University since 2019. Hi Roderick, it's great to speak to you.
Hi Miranda.
Now, we are a year on from when Anglia Ruskin University was named University of the Year at the THE Awards. How did it feel when you heard Anglia Ruskin announced at the ceremony?
Well, it was a great surprise, I have to say. I kind of had my money on Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine. They do amazing work. It was really exciting, and I think for all of us it was really rewarding.
Brilliant. Now, one of the key factors in your win was the establishment of a new university campus in Peterborough, a city that previously had no higher education presence. Is that right?
It is, and I do think that is a pretty remarkable development, and I'm really glad that the judges recognise that. I think it's remarkable partly because, as you say, Peterborough it's a large city. It's a growing city. It's really quite fast growing, and they've wanted a university for a really, really long time. And there've been several attempts to establish a university there, but it's never worked. It's never really got off the ground. And it's been a very rapid, very successful initiation of higher education in a city that needs it, and Anglia Ruskin played a key role in that. Obviously, it's part of us, but it's very unusual in the fact that it's been brought about by partnership between the city council and the combined authority and the university. And I think it's a really exciting model about expanding HE into cold spots.
ARU Peterborough opened in 2022. Before we touch on the process of how it sort of got off the ground in the first instance, how's the campus actually developed since its opening?
So it's developed really significantly. There's now 3 fully operational buildings. And again, the fact that we've worked in partnership has allowed us to secure funding and capital that plainly isn't easily available in the HE system at the minute. So there's 2 really lovely, really modern, purpose-built teaching buildings and 1 research and development centre paid for by something around £70 million of funding, largely drawn down through central and local government and development funding, with some capital from Anglia Ruskin, but not the sort of development that we'd have been able to secure on our own, and a rate of growth which is really unusual.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, really nice, I have to say, to see a recognition from the public sector of the fact that higher education is a great investment. As we know, the funding situation for higher education across the UK is very tricky just now, so it's really nice to hear a positive story. The partnership model, as you say, is a really interesting one. Can you briefly, because this is a big question, but could you talk me through the key stages of how such a huge project was conceived, planned, and then delivered?
Yeah, so I think that a really key driving force was the establishment of a new combined authority, the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority, with a mayor that was really ambitious for Peterborough. And Peterborough is a city which has forever, I suspect, kind of sat in the shadow of Cambridge. It's 30, 40 minutes away, but extraordinarily different in terms of the level of investment and the levels of opportunity. And you see really high levels of social inequality and health inequality between Cambridge and Peterborough. So the combined authority for the whole county, I think, was really keen to drive growth and investment in the city, and saw HE, and the mayor was quite visionary about this and really bullish about this, saw HE as a key driver for that. So they made clear their intention to secure a university partner to establish a university in Peterborough, and we were involved in early conversations, and then there was a procurement exercise, and we won the competition. And I think key to this whole partnership was a willingness to be absolutely focused on what the city needed for the combined authority and the city council and the university to kind of set aside kind of self-interest as a principal motivator and look instead for what the needs were of the city, and to work really closely with local employers in determining the curriculum. All of the courses have been written with local businesses. Kind of placements, internships are all absolutely key to how the courses are conceived and the work that's underway. So there's just been a real kind of aligning of the stars. It felt very obviously like a kind of a once in a generation opportunity. And the first conversation I had around this was, I think, in the first week that I was appointed interim vice-chancellor at Anglia Ruskin. It was something I really, really wanted to make happen.
Yeah, and you have. What you say about the whole way the institution has been developed has been kind of in line with local needs, and even down to the curriculum and the courses. On that, people talk about community engagement and working with partners beyond the institutional walls a lot, but I believe it is easier said than done. How have you gone about engaging the community in Peterborough to really ensure the benefits are felt across the city?
So that work now is led by Ross Renton, the principal, who's just fantastically successful and effective at building community engagement. So every time every building is opened, the first event that's been held is a community day, where the building is just open to the public and the community, and events are scheduled which will attract onto campus, not students or staff, but just visitors, just people in the community. Equally working with all kind of civic groups, different religious, different faith groups, outreach, working very hard with schools and colleges, and constantly looking to kind of design and redesign what we offer and how we describe to reflect what we hear as being the local need. That it's very much, that isn't kind of in the DNA of Anglia Ruskin anyway. We are, very much rooted in the region. We're proud to be a regional university. We have really strong international links. We have the same ambitions around international reach and impact for our research as any university, but we are absolutely rooted in our region. And our first job, as far as I see it, is to be really effective in meeting the needs of key regional stakeholders, especially across the public services.
Yeah, and I've also read that nearly half of the students studying at certainly ARU Peterborough are from the local area.
I think that's right. I think it's about 48% of the applicants have a PE postcode, and something like 50%. And this, for me, this is the most remarkable stat of all. Something like 50%, I'm afraid I don't remember the exact number, of first-year students in a survey responded that they would not have gone to university at all had they not had the opportunity to go to ARU Peterborough. And for me, that's really an important message. There are large numbers of very able young people, typically, who have the aspiration and the ability to benefit from HE, but for a number of complex reasons will not travel. And the expectation that, traveling is part of going to university, living away in, quote, term time, end quote, is just not fit for purpose for a lot of people for whom HE can be really transformative.
Yeah, that's an amazing stat. That suggests that the university is very much successfully reaching a lot of primarily young people who wouldn't have necessarily considered university, may have almost, in some cases, felt slightly disenfranchised from the whole system if they hadn't had previous family or others that they know particularly involved with it. So I wondered what outreach work the university undertakes to encourage these young people to apply.
So right across ARU, we do a lot of outreach with a kind of schools and college engagement team, but we also have, I think, really quite ambitious and quite effective programs with particular strands. So, for example, we have I think a really effective program to support care leavers to understand that HE can be available to them to identify their specific kind of challenges and needs, not just to come into HE, but to kind of thrive in HE. And lots of our courses, so our School of Medicine, for example, in Chelmsford was established specifically because of the really severe lack in GPs in Essex, and the way to tackle that, everybody agreed, was to have a particular focus on recruiting students locally, giving them placements locally, and then encouraging them to find their first roles locally. So we have kind of specific programs to target student recruitments by specific student groups or by kind of residential area in order to deliver the ambitions of whichever campus we're working on.
And then what support mechanisms are actually in place once the students are with you? Because for those maybe not so familiar with a higher education system, it could be fairly daunting.
So I think student support, really high quality student support, is key to our mission. We do set out to be a university which recruits as kind of diverse a population of students as we can. The great majority of our students, this is true for lots of universities, but the great majority of our students are first generation HE participants. So there's a whole series of initiatives to support transition into Anglia Ruskin. We even have a program called Into ARU, which is a program that all incoming students take. We have welcome buddy schemes, and then we have pretty comprehensive package of well-being support. That could be, counselling and advice service, disability dyslexia support, financial support. We have a comprehensive financial package of bursaries and other support. So for us, kind of identifying the barriers that prevent people with potential from accessing HE, that's key to what we do, because we're proud to have a really large proportion of our students come from groups typically underrepresented in HE. That's definitive of Anglia Ruskin's role in the sector.
Yeah, the fact it is the core of the university must in a way help in developing that sense of student belonging for all involved.
It does help. It also helps clarify our strategy and our approach and our KPIs. And we have a pretty, I think, unusual kind of sense of alignment with the key values and the purpose of the university. We have a board which is very, very clear and solid about those. So I think we probably do a better job than some at kind of resisting the distractions of kind of initiatives or drivers which aren't actually key to our strategy. So our board has got a really significant kind of level of ambition and a significant risk appetite for delivering core strategic developments such as Peterborough, or such as rolling out really large-scale public sector education. So we do all the police education for Norfolk, Suffolk, Hertfordshire, Cambridgeshire, Bedfordshire, Kent and Essex. And that was a really significant, contractual liability to take on, also a huge opportunity. But it's because it's core to our mission about recruiting locally, supporting public service reform and public service education, and thereby really improving outcomes for people in the region that we live in.
Yeah, so a really good laser focus on where efforts should be channeled rather than just launching things either because they tick a box or maybe look good or any other reason. I'm going to just segue a little bit because I was keen before we finish to hear about the Samaritans University Hub, which also formed an element of your award submission last year. But having read about it, it's just a really interesting initiative given the massive, well-documented rise in mental health problems among young people across the board, but certainly students. And I believe this was piloted with ARU Cambridge, but has then expanded to Chelmsford. Can you first describe a bit for those listening what this is and how it's developed?
Yeah, thank you. So the Samaritans Hub, I think it is the first in the UK, and it's been a really, really interesting development led by colleagues in our Faculty of Health and Medicine and Social Care. It's the important thing to say is, yes, it's on our campus. We have two of them. They're on our campuses and they're staffed by student and staff volunteers, but it's not providing help to students. It's providing help to anybody that calls into the Samaritans. So it's our students and our staff train as Samaritans volunteers and work on campus to provide online and phone support for anybody that's calling into Samaritans. So why is this attractive to us? Principally because the training which Samaritans offers the volunteers is really excellent. Pretty much everybody I know that's had that training has found it just transformative for their work as a mental health nurse student or an academic or any other a student on any other course. So it provides an opportunity for our community to contribute to the work of the Samaritans, which is a charity we've supported for a long time, and gives access to really rewarding voluntary work and really high quality training for students and staff at the university.
Fantastic. So it's a really great example of a kind of mutually beneficial initiative. It's been wonderful to speak to you, and I hope that the afterglow of the 2023 awards continues to bathe Anglia Ruskin University. Thanks so much for giving us your time.
Great, thank you very much.
The story of how Anglia Ruskin has partnered with local government and other agencies to bring higher education to a city that didn't have a university is so inspiring, but what an enormous undertaking. I was also really moved, if I may say, that its presence has made university a pathway for students who hadn't previously considered it, and also allowed them to go to university locally, which makes a huge difference, I think, in terms of support systems and making it a feasible pathway into a different future.
Yeah, it is. It's a wonderful example of where partnership, work, collaboration, whatever term you want to attach to it, has a really, really beneficial effect and really kind of widens access. So that's it for this week. I hope you enjoyed hearing about these amazing projects and how they have developed. But if you want to delve further into the advice and insight from some of the absolute best and most inspiring individuals, teams, and initiatives across the higher education sector, you can find all of that in our latest Spotlight Guide that I mentioned earlier, which is really a showcase of this year's award nominees and all of their work. You'll find that at www.timeshighereducation.com/campus. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like and share, and we will be back with you in a couple of weeks.
You're listening to a Times Higher Education podcast.